Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to Off in the S's, a podcast focusing on the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. I'm your host, Stu, and today we are going to be going over the Lexus Grand Prix at Mid-Ohio, and all of the news to come out of the weekend's races, as well as some pretty darn good on-track action that took place last weekend. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off with some news from the world of IMSA, and it comes straight from the top, as IMSA President John Doonan has reaffirmed that its event at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park will move ahead as planned, despite Canada's COVID-19 vaccination requirements that are sure to impact team participation from multiple teams and personnel. The event, which is slated to take place on the weekend of July 1st to 3rd, has recently been named the Chevrolet Grand Prix and will feature DPI, LMP3, GTD Pro, and GTD classes to go along with the supporting Michelin Pilot Challenge series, as well as the IMSA Prototype Challenge. Multiple championship contending teams from at least 3 of the WeatherTech Championship classes have indicated that they will not go to CTMP if the current vaccination requirement stands. A similar number of Pilot Challenge teams are understood to be skipping the event as well, and based on paddock conversations during the round at Mid-Ohio, according to Sports Car 365, they believe that as much as 25% of the paddock could be unvaccinated, although John Doonan said the sanctioning body does not have any concrete information on this at this time. Doonan did confirm suggestions from competitors for the race to either A, not count for championship points, or B, for IMSA to allow teams to drop their worst result of the season, although the sanctioning body is holding firm and not making any adjustments to the sporting regulations. IMSA is also looking at all schedule options for the 2023 Sports Car Championship season, according to, again, President John Doonan, who has not ruled out the addition of an additional endurance race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He reiterated that a 5th Michelin Endurance Cup round would not be possible, quote, at the moment. This comes after Roger Penske told reporters at the 6 Hours of Spa earlier this month that the proposed IMSA race must be an endurance race, believed to be at least 6 hours in length. Doonan said that dropping the WeatherTech Championship schedule from 12 to 11 events in total to maintain a similar runtime for competitors is, however, a scenario that could be on the table. He says that they believe that teams look at their expenses based on running time and not total race events, although that does factor in, of course, over the season. Of course, the Indianapolis Road Course was previously featured on the 2014 WeatherTech Championship schedule, but was dropped amid a calendar reshuffle that included the addition of Lime Rock Park as a GT-only event. In some LMP2 news, Will Stevens was added to Tower Motorsports lineup in advance of last weekend's Lexus Grand Prix at Mid-Ohio. He was in subbing for the ELMS points leader Luis Delatraz. Stevens competes full-time in the World Endurance Championship in the LMP2 category, as well as being Wayne Taylor Racing's Michelin Endurance Cup pilot in DPI. He joins the full-season driver of John Ferrano. Of course, Luis Delatraz was competing in ELMS at Imola this past weekend with Prema. And Era Motorsports will work with M Sport in a second LMP2 entry for the remainder of the IMSA Championship season. The Indianapolis-based team will supply an Orica 07 Gibson and equipment to the British team that will make its prototype debut, beginning with next month's Salen's 6 Hours of the Glen. Races at Road America and the season-ending Motul Petit Le Mans are also planned with a to-be-confirmed driver lineup. In GTD, the entry list for this past weekend's Lexus Grand Prix at Mid-Ohio dropped to 31 entries from the initial 34 that were speculated to be on the entry list. Among the teams that were not present include the, of course, confirmed withdrawal of NTE Sports, Lamborghini, along with no-shows from 47 Motorsports in LMP3 and Allegra Motorsports in the GTD category. It also has been reported that Allegra was regrouping following last month's round at the WeatherTech Raceway Laguna Seca. That is according to a Mercedes spokesperson. The team had initially announced a Michelin Endurance Cup only program this year, but later added on the Sprint Cup events following the 12 Hours of Sebring. The Rob Farrell-owned Hardpoint Porsche pulled its GTD entry from Mid-Ohio as well in order to pursue business opportunities within motorsports. Hardpoint has reaffirmed its commitment to the remainder of the Endurance Cup races this year, as well as some additional sprint races, according to a team spokesperson. Farrell and co-driver Catherine Legg's participation in the 24 Hours of Le Mans is also in question, but Farrell has reaffirmed that the number 99 Porsche will return to action at the Sail-In 6 Hours of the Glen and season-ending Motul Petit Le Mans with Stefan Wilson in the lineup. Other good news for all IMSA fans is that IMSA and Radio Show Limited have confirmed a renewal to the long-standing IMSA Radio partnership. The partnership has taken place since 2015, where IMSA Radio has provided live audio coverage for all of the WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, Michelin Pilot Challenge, and IMSA Prototype Challenge races. Of course, IMSA radio commentary is also provided for other IMSA sanctioned series, such as the Lamborghini Super Trofeo North America, Idemitsu Mazda MX-5 Cup, and the Porsche Carrera Cup North America, presented by the Cayman Islands. Also, a note going into Mid-Ohio, there's several changes that have taken place to the course that have occurred since last year's race, including the removal of a pedestrian bridge in turns 9 and 10, and that was used as a reference point for many of the drivers, so some of those track veterans going to have to be looking for a new brake reference point here. And then there were also several new patches of concrete added in several corners of the track. And to wrap up the general news with some LMDH coverage is Lamborghini finally has officially announced its development of an LMDH car that will enable them to compete for overall wins in the World Endurance Championship as well as the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship beginning in 2024. The program's confirmation comes after more than a year of speculation, and it returns the total number of active LMDH programs to 6, with Lamborghini joining Acura, Alpine, BMW, Cadillac, and Porsche. It is believed that Ligier Automotive is set to provide the base chassis, while the engine is expected to be a Lamborghini unit, and the Lamborghini LMDH race car's debut is supposed to be within the 2024 season. It is loosely projected to take place in the first quarter of the year, with the target to be at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 2024. The current plan, though, is to have a maximum of 4 race cars and a minimum of 2 entered evenly across IMSA and WEC. Regarding the team that is going to tackle both the IMSA and WEC competitions, it is something that has not been decided, and is something that it will be communicated at the end of the season. As I just stated, it will be a single team to field the Lamborghini LMDH car for the first year of competition, at least, in both WEC and IMSA. And don't worry, guys, Lamborghini is not going anywhere on the GT racing side of things. They are going to continue to remain involved in GT racing, despite its arrival into prototypes, with continued support of the Super Trofeo, Cup, where, of course, the updated Huracan was introduced earlier this year. And then, of course, in GT3, where the Huracan Evo 2 is set to arrive next year in 2023. Now, before we get into the race rundown, take a moment and make sure that you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app. Make sure you never miss an episode of Off in the S's. You can also interact with us on Twitter at Off in the S's or on YouTube at Off in the S's podcast. Links to both of those can be found in the show notes. Also of note, we are getting very, very close to putting up unique YouTube content as well, whether it be just some addition, or whether it be essentially this podcast that you're listening to right now, but in video form, or some additional on track or at the track action, as of course I will be present at the 6 Hours of the Glen, as well as the Chevrolet Grand Prix weekend, which of course takes place at CTMP. So there'll be some coverage of it that is posted there. We're gonna ease into it a little bit, but keep your eyes peeled on Off in the S's on YouTube for all of that. All right, let's get into some coverage of the actual race weekend here at Mid-Ohio, and we are going to kick things off with a little bit of practice. It was Felipe Albuquerque that led the way in opening practice, and the DPI points co-leading number 10 Acura was at the top of the timesheets with a 111.828. This edged out the other Acura of Meyershank Racing's Tom Bloomquist by just under a tenth of a second. Earl Bamber set the third quickest time in the 02 Cadillac, with Pipo Derani and Sebastian Bourdais rounding out the top 5. LMP2 was led by the class championship leader, the number 18 Era Motorsports entry of Ryan Dalziel. He posted a 113.478 to edge out the number 11 PR1 Matheson Motorsports entry of Jonathan Bomarito by 0.4 of a second. And Colin Brown topped the timesheets in LMP3 in the number 54 Core Autosport Ligier with a 117.603. In GTD, it was the number 96 Turner Motorsport BMW of Robbie Foley that set a 121.220 and was 0.2 of a second faster than Jack Hawksworth in the number 17 Vassar Sullivan Lexus. The session did see 2 red flags, with the first for the number 36 Andretti Autosport Ligier of Jarrett Andretti, which was stopped on course. And then later on, there was an incident between Lance Wilsey and the number 70 Inception Racing McLaren of Brandon Erb, who had a coming together in turn 11. We talked about it in last week's show. That second half of the track, it gets a little bit tight. And there's going to be some more incidents to talk about as the weekend goes on here. But they came together in turn 11 in the closing minutes that did result in an early checkered flag. It did not appear that either car sustained any damage. In the second practice, it was Sebastian Bourdais that led the way. The Chip Ganassi Racing driver posted a 110.507 lap time to edge out the number 60 Meyershank Racing Acura of Ollie Jarvis by just over a tenth of a second. In LMP2, it was the number 20 High Class Racing Orica of Anders Fjorbach, who set a 113 flat to edge out Will Stevens in the number 8 Tower Motorsport entry by half a tenth. And Colin Brown again paced the LMP3 class in the Core Autosport Ligier, posting a 116.630. Madison Snow in GTD led a BMW sweep of the top 2 positions in that class, posting a 120.261 lap time in that number 1 Paul Miller Racing entry. Snow was just under 0.2 of a second faster than the number 96 Turner Motorsport BMW of Bill Oberlin, and the pair of Vassar Sullivan Lexi were third and fourth, with Jack Hawksworth's number 17 entry ahead of Frankie Montecalvo's number 12. This session saw 2 red flags, with the first to retrieve the number 70 Inception Racing McLaren, who just couldn't seem to stay out of trouble in these practices, which was driven by Jordan Pepper at the time. He spun out and became beached in the turn 1 gravel. And the second red flag was for Ryan Eversley's Rick Ware Racing Acura, who came to a halt in the closing minutes of the session to bring out the second red flag, which set up an 8-minute shootout for DPI cars and a mini sort of mock qualifying type run. When qualifying rolled around, it was Sebastian Bourdais who took his third IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship pole of the season in what was a damp combined DPI and LMP2 qualifying session. He posted a best lap of a 110.439 in the 01 Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac to edge out the number 10 Wayne Taylor Racing Acura of Felipe Albuquerque by just over 0.2 of a second. Ollie Jarvis qualified third in the number 16 Meyer Shank Racing Acura, followed by the 02 Chip Ganassi Racing Cadillac of Alex Lynn, the number 31 Action Express Racing Cadillac of Tristan Nunez, with Tristan Vautier bringing up the rear. In LMP2, the pole went to Patrick Kelly in the number 52 PR1 Matheson Motorsports Orica in a lockout of the front row along with teammate Stephen Thomas. Kelly completed a best lap of 114.484 to edge out Thomas by 9.5 tenths. Henrik Hedman in the number 81 Dragon Speed Orica qualified third. He was 0.5 tenth back of Thomas. Jared Andretti scored his first career pole in LMP3 in the number 36 Andretti Autosport Ligier. Andretti set a best time of a 117.104 to edge out series debutant Josh Sarche in the number 58 MLT Motorsports Ligier by just over 0.3 of a second. Dan Goldberg qualified third in the number 38 Performance Tech Ligier. And in GTD, it was Madison Snow who scored the pole honors for Paul Miller Racing and BMW. He reeled off a 120.525 in the number 1 BMW on his final flying lap to edge out Stephen McAleer in number 32 not Gilbert Korthoff. It is now just Team Korthoff Motorsports Mercedes of Stephen McAleer by 0.2 of a second. Roman DeAngelis will start third in class in the number 27 Heart of Racing Aston. In the IMSA Prototype Challenge, it was Mimo Gidley who scored pole for the 90-minute race in the number 23 JDC Motorsports Nissan. Mimo Gidley and Alex Corribia also put on a dominant performance on Sunday en route to victory in the caution-free IMSA Prototype Challenge race. The final margin of victory over there was a quite large 41.7 seconds over Tonis Kazmits, who charged from the back of the field twice to take second place in that number 60 Wolver Racing Ligier. Meanwhile, in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge, it was Kenton Koch that came out on top in a very close qualifying session in the Michelin Pilot Challenge. The Murillo Racing driver scored his second consecutive pole in that number 56 Mercedes with a quick lap of a 127.126. The number 28 RS1 Porsche of Alexander Primet will start second, followed by the number 72 Murillo Racing entry of Kenny Murillo to make it 2 Mercedes in the top 3 starting spots. Luca Mars starts fourth, and the top 4 were separated by just 0.063 seconds, just over 0.5 tenth. It was a very close qualifying session in that Grand Sport category. Meanwhile, though, in TCR, it was Tiago Montero in that special one-off effort that scored the pole position in TCR. In the Veterans IMSA debut, he posted a best lap of a 128.829 in the number 37 LA Honda World Racing Honda to edge out the number 33 Brian Herta Autosport Hyundai of Gabby Chavez, who subbed in for Mark Wilkins by just over 0.3 of a second. Of note, the Grand Sport and TCR cars were very close in times further down the scoring sheet, with there being many GS or Grand Sport entries mixed in with TCR on the bottom half of that time sheet. With multiple cars running out of fuel on the last lap of the race, it was Eric Foss that held off a hard-charging Trent Hindman on a near-empty tank of fuel to take victory in the Mid-Ohio 120. The two cars were almost nose to tail on the final lap and were separated by just a shade under 0.7 of a second. Foss was forced to conserve fuel during his stint after co-driver and pole sitter Kenton Koch pitted one lap early due to a loose wheel. The fuel saving over the course of the stint cost them their 13-second lead, but ultimately they were able to hold on for victory. Hindman and co-driver Alan Bjornsson extended their points lead with the runner-up result, with Andrew Davis and Michael McCann completing the podium in third place in their Porsche. Meanwhile, in TCR, it was Harry Gottsacker and Parker Chase that delivered Hyundai's first TCR of the win of the season. It's kind of wild to imagine that it's taken them this long to pick up that first win of the season, with how dominant they've seemed at some of the tracks earlier on. In a 1-2 sweep for Brian Herta Autosport, the duo in the number 98 Hyundai Elantra finished just under 0.7 of a second ahead of defending class champions Michael Lewis and Taylor Hagler in the number 1 entry. John Morley in the number 61 Roadshagger Audi completed the podium with co-driver Gavin Ernstone. Moving on to the Sunday race recap, though, it was Ricky Taylor and Felipe Albuquerque that maintained Acura's undefeated run of wins at Mid-Ohio with another controlling race victory in the Lexus Grand Prix at Mid-Ohio. The number 10 and number 01 pole-sitting Cadillac from Chip Ganassi Racing had a great battle in the opening minutes of the race before Bourdais was able to ultimately take the lead back, which he had lost very early on, and pulled out a 6-second gap. With a little over an hour to go, and after the race's only full course yellow, controversy struck, though, when the number 10 and number 01 made contact, spinning the 01 off course and dropping to the back of the DPI grid, and thus 20 seconds behind the race leader. Now, this was an interesting one, as this came, as mentioned, just after a safety car restart, with about 1 hour and 9 minutes left to go in the race. So both of these cars had fresh tires on them, and we do know that in IMSA, you can't, there's no tire warmers, nothing like that. So it does really take a couple of laps for these tires to come up and achieve maximum grip. Also of note is Renger van de Zandert was just fresh into that number 01 Cadillac, which may also have played into this a little bit. You know, you're getting your feet wet a little bit. And Ricky Taylor was trying to take advantage of that and try and leapfrog him into the race lead. Now, both of these cars, they came together, and they didn't come together just once. They came together in turn 9, I believe it was. Which was a corner before where the incident took place, and both cars, like they were really beaten. It was hard racing for sure. They came together. The number 10 put a wheel off a little bit, able to keep control of it, stayed in there, and then on corner exit, they were side by side and really didn't. It's a very difficult corner because you definitely do lose more grip. It's over the crest, and we talked about the elevation changes on the second half of this course in the last episode. It's a really difficult position for the drivers to be in, as of course you're racing very hard for the race lead, but ultimately the number 01 was not given space on corner exit. They came together a little bit. And unfortunately for the 01, they put a wheel off as well, and it didn't end up as good as it did for the number 10 when they dipped the wheel off the corner before. Now, IMSA would eventually go on to rule no further action would be needed, but I don't know. This is one that we're going to come away from the weekend talking about. The number 01 and the number 10. Did Ricky Taylor leave Renger van de Zandert enough space? Will we see a bit of retaliation maybe going into the next race? I don't know, these guys are usually pretty cool-headed, but it's a fierce championship hunt over there in the DPI ranks, and this is a big blow for that 0-1 Cadillac, who looked poised to pick up the win here. So a big hit for them. We'll see how this ultimately affects the battle between these two teams as the season goes on, and ultimately at the end of the season, if this affects any of the championship standings. So while the 0-1 did lose 20 seconds, they dropped back to 6th at the time. They would make up one of those positions and go on to finish 5th. Of course, further back up the podium grid, the number 60 Meyershank Racing entry of Tom Bloomquist and Ollie Jarvis benefited from that bit of beating and banging, and they came home second in what is yet another Acura 1-2 finish. All things aside from this weekend, that 0-1 Cadillac was the only Cadillac that even gave Acura a run for their money this weekend, as number 31 Action Express Racing Cadillac of Pipo Durrani and Tristan Nunez, they did complete the podium, but they were fairly far off those top two Acuras by the end of it. In LMP2, honors went to the number 81 Dragon Speed Orica of Juan Pablo Montoya and Henrik Hedman, although this one didn't come without controversy as well. Juan Pablo Montoya received a late race penalty for spinning around the then class leading number 11 PR1 Matheson Motorsports Orica of Jonathan Bomarito. These two cars came together at the keyhole, which is turn 2, with 25 minutes to go, and resulted in a drive-through penalty for Montoya for incident responsibility. After serving the drive-through penalty, Montoya emerged from the pits about 6 seconds behind the number 11 car that had spun. So these guys were also in a bit of a class of their own. It goes without saying, if they were able to both recover from a spin and a drive-through penalty and still maintain first and second. But after serving that penalty, Montoya quickly charged back and made further contact with Bomarito to retake the lead in the final 10 minutes. He would cross the line 13 seconds ahead of that number 11, so Montoya was, again, he was on another level in this race. But the number 10 high-class racing Orica of Anders Fjorbach and Dennis Anderson did complete that podium in third. But the, of course, big takeaway here from this battle was just Montoya and the aggression that he showed out on track on the initial contact and also later on. But man, the raw pace that he had shown, I mean, a very deserving winner in this class. Core Autosports' Colin Brown and John Bennett dominated to pick up the LMP3 win in their number 54 Ligier. They finished an entire lap ahead of the number 30 JR3 Racing Ligier of Garrett Grist, with Felipe Fraga's number 74 Riley Motorsports Ligier completing the podium in third. Well, we heard you like controversy, so there was more controversy that happened in GTD. A late race pass on Bill Auberlen by Jordan Pepper put the Inception Racing McLaren into victory lane for the first time in WeatherTech competition after pulling off a massive fuel-saving final stint. The Optimum Motorsport number 70 got around Auberlen with less than 5 minutes remaining, while both cars were attempting to save fuel. But hold that thought, you want the controversy to slip in. The win for Pepper and teammate Brandon Erb was short-lived, as after the race they failed post-race technical inspection and gave the Turner Motorsports duo of Bill Auberlen and Robbie Foley the race win. The win is a record-extending 65th career IMSA victory in the top level, albeit, for Bill Auberlen, and the first 1-2 class finish for the new for 2022 BMW in IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship competition. Paul Miller Racing's Brian Sellers and Madison Snow picked up second place, with the number 10 Vassar Sullivan Lexus of Aaron Tielitz and Frankie Montecalvo rounding out the podium. In post-race notes, there was kind of a pretty impressive feat. We talked about how fast Juan Pablo Montoya was a second ago, but what was even more impressive is he was pulling double duty this weekend between Mid-Ohio and Saturday's NTT IndyCar Series race, which took place at Indianapolis Motor Speedway on the road course. The Indy 500 isn't for another couple weeks. The Colombian was slated to get his first laps of the weekend in that LMP2 during Sunday's warm-up. So he got about 20 minutes worth of practice going into this one. And that left the bronze-rated Henrik Hedman as the solo driver on Friday and had to do all of the setup work on the car as well. Also of note, it was Acura's 5th consecutive DPI victory at Mid-Ohio, and 3 new lap records were set at the track this weekend. In qualifying, Patrick Kelly in the PR1 Matheson Motorsports LMP2 put up a 114.340. Jared Andretti completed a 117.104 in LMP3, and Will Stevens set a new race lap record in LMP2, which was even faster than in qualifying, with the number 8 Tower Motorsports entry putting up a 113.725. The Heart of Racing Aston Martin was forced to duck into the pit lane on the final lap of the race for a splash of fuel. The Aston Martin driver, Maxime Martin, had been running 4th in class at the time, and if they hadn't had to make that pit stop, they would have been promoted to a podium position following that post-race penalty for the McLaren. IMSA President John Doonan told Sportscar 365 that the sanctioning body is likely to utilize a similar philosophy on prioritizing race events next year as well. We've talked about the supply issues that they've had with getting those Michelin tires, and that is expected to carry on into 2023. He did say that an outright ban on private testing is not being considered at this time. And finally, Corvette Racing has all but ruled out its second Corvette GTD entry from returning for any of the remaining WeatherTech Championship races this year. And this is according to GM Sports Car Racing Program Manager Laura Weintraub-Klauser, who confirmed again to Sports Car 365 that there are no plans for either a second World Endurance Championship entry or IMSA entry beyond the confirmed 2-car lineup for the upcoming 24 Hours of Le Mans. All the action from this past weekend, there have been some changes in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship standings. And starting in DPI, it is the number 10 Konica Minolta Acura that leads now. They were tied heading into this weekend. They now lead with 1,707 points to the Meyer-Shank Racing number 60's 1,675. The 02 Cadillac Racing entry has 1,603, and it's very tight for 4th and 5th between the number 5 and number 31 JDC Miller Motorsport entry and the Whelen Engineering Cadillac. Those two they're still within about 200 and so points back of the Konica Minolta Acura, so they're still in it, as is the 01 Cadillac racing car. We're just under halfway to go in this IMSA season, so there's still lots of movement that can take place. Nobody's out of it yet here in DPI, and the next race here upcoming at Belle Isle is certain to throw a wrench into these standings a little bit. In LMP2, it is the number 52 PR1 Matheson Motorsports entry that leads by 10 points over the number 81 Dragon Speed USA entry. Again, that's about 1 position on track. This is such a close class right here. The number 18 Era Motorsports entry is only 9 points back of the number 81, and then in 4th and 5th place have 950 and 948 points. So they're separated by 2 points, and still They are 950, 948 points. The leaders only have 982. So, you're looking at like 4 positions on track there. That's separating these top 5 teams. Don't rule out the number 20 High Class Racing entry yet either. They have 878 points. So they're still within 100 points of those race leaders. They are not to be ruled out. LMP2 is going to go down to the wire this year, it looks like. And then in LMP3, what do you know? We have another close battle here. JR3 Racing with 688 points. 54 Core Autosport entry, 661. And the number 33 Sean Creech Motorsport entry with 647. So very close between those top 3. They separate a little bit more as you go down from there, but even still, the top 6 are separated by 111 points. So again, close in LMP3 as well. Starting to get this trend going here. In GTD, well, we talked about it. It's another close battle. Gilbert Korthoff Motorsports did assume the championship points lead. They are now on top of the number 16 Wright Motorsports Porsche by 12 points, but do not count the Turner Motorsport BMW out yet. They, of course, picked up the race victory here this weekend. They have 1,161 points. They are within striking distance of those race leaders. So it's, of course, a very close battle up and down the GTD field. A few teams are starting to separate themselves a little bit now, but the top 5 are separated by about 230 points. So still a very close field and still lots of manufacturers that are in it across the board. Going to take a little bit of a dip into the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge standings as well quickly here in the Grand Sport category. It's not as close as some of the other divisions. It is the number 7 Volt Racing Aston Martin that is 1,230 points. They are over the number 56 Murillo Racing Mercedes, who have 1,100 even, so 130 point difference there. The next car back is the number 28 RS1 entry. That is 970 points. So, they're starting to run away with a little bit, some of these top entries, but still not over yet. There are still 6 races to go in that Michelin Pilot Challenge season. So the next race at Watkins Glen will mark the halfway mark. And in TCR, it is the number 1 Michael Johnson Racing with Brian Herta Autosports entry of course, Michael Lewis and Taylor Hagler that find themselves in the points lead again. They lead by 130 points over the number 19 Vandester Racing entry. It's very close here amongst those top 4, especially 2nd through 4th. They are separated by just 30 points with the number 5 KMW Motorsports entry in 3rd, with just 10 points behind 2nd. And then the Michael Johnson Racing, number 98, currently sits in 4th, 20 points behind them. So lots of great action going up and down the IMSA grid here. You're not going to want to miss a moment of it when lots of these cars take to the track next time in Belle Isle, or for some of these support series in Watkins Glen. There is lots of racing to keep you interested here on this weekend as DTM heads to the Lausitz Ring Saturday and Sunday. That starts at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Meanwhile, the GT World Challenge America also goes on Saturday and Sunday at 11:15 Eastern Time. That can be viewed on YouTube. I'll send a link to the show notes in that. And they are competing at NOLA this race weekend. This was supposed to be the weekend that they were competing at the Circuit of the Ozarks, but of course that did not end up coming to fruition, as the track is not 100% finished. There's also F1 action this weekend in Spain. They're in Barcelona for qualifying on Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time and the race on Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. You don't want to miss that. NASCAR Trucks and the SpeedyCash.com 220 goes Friday night at 8:30 Eastern Time with the Xfinity Series and the SRS Distribution 250 on Saturday afternoon at 1:30 Eastern Time. And then the Cup Series has their All-Star race this weekend. They go Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And finally, the last bit of racing news, or other racing that's going on this weekend, IndyCar qualifying for the Indianapolis 500. That goes this Saturday at noon Eastern Time. And then there is a second session that goes Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Of course, the Indianapolis 500 has a unique qualifying format, and I'll post a link that describes all of that if you're interested in tuning in the show notes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that will wrap up our Lexus Grand Prix of Mid-Ohio preview episode. Once again, a big thank you to our early Patreon supporters, and if you too want to support the show, then you can go to patreon.com/offintheesses. You can also support the show by hitting that subscribe or follow button on your favorite podcasting app to make sure you never miss a new episode, and by leaving us a review. You can, of course, follow along with us on Twitter at @OffInTheEsses or on YouTube at @OffInTheEsses Podcast. Once again, a big thank you for tuning in. I hope everyone has a great race weekend and doesn't go off in the S's.